All right. We are live. Get some trash out of the way, just a little housekeeping. Um, I understand this is our first official live where I was able to actually send out a blast email, and I understand that probably people won't be uh, available to attend, but they will be able to see the live recording. So I wanted to make sure that I provide some quality information to you all. And today's topic is going to be about movement quality. And specifically, I want to talk about the neck first. We'll get into the shoulder, we'll get into the hips, and we'll get into the ankle if we have time. Run time probably going to be about 20, 30 minutes. So I want to give some time near the end for some Q&A, because the purpose of this is really to try to connect with people and really dive more into the specifics of what someone's scenario is, because it's really easy to misconstrue information out there. The best thing that we've always talked about as trainers is you can Google the best program out there. You can Google a workout program, you can Google the best nutrition plan, but what matters is implementation. How does it meet where you are at right now? And that's usually the hardest thing for people to do, and that's what allows trainers to have a job. So the reason we're starting with the neck is because just over 10 years of experience and research, and my own personal experience, my workouts, is I can adjust my ankle, I can adjust my knee, I can adjust my hip, but what really matters is the command center, because all of this sensory input is happening at our eyes, and that's our central nervous system. And then the peripheral nervous system is more of the action and response to what it's perceiving. And a lot of times we can miscalculate, our brain can miscalculate. We're processing I think anywhere from 30 to 60,000 pieces of information a day, and you can understand how that can we can fall into the weeds a little bit and misconstrue some things. So when we can adjust our neck and have our head situated properly, usually that calculation can be more accurate. And another thing that goes along with this is alignment. Alignment equals strength. So we talk about a normal S curve in our spine, because what we have is we have our basal root ganglia, which is at the base of the brain stem, and then we have our dorsal root ganglia, and that goes all the way, kind of like the top of the vertebrae. If you reach back and you touch the top of your vertebrae, you're basically right where the dorsal root ganglia extends down the whole spine. So if I'm kinked, you can think of like a kink in your hose or a kink in a wire. You're not going to get the best signaling transfer. You're not going to get the best response out of your body. So, talk a lot about the posterior chain. That's the back. That's, having our shoulders stacked on our rib cage. Our core is engaged, sitting on our pelvis. Our glutes are engaged. Our pelvic floor is engaged, and then hamstrings down to our heels, because again, that's where the best nerve signaling back down to the rest of our body is happening, at the back of our spine there. So yeah, let's talk about the neck now. The neck has I guess we could say 6 basic motions. We have flexion, we have extension, we have lateral flexion, and then we have rotation towards either side. And now the first thing you want to do is try to perform those movements and notice if you feel any restriction. Now, a lot of times people will get to here and feel like they're stuck. Something's keeping them from going down on that other side. It's the other side, the opposite side, that's staying engaged. And another little piece here to understand this whole movement quality is the fact that our structure, if anyone's familiar with architecture, our structural integrity of our body is called a tensegrity structure. So, a lot of times we think we're like bricks stacked on top of each other. That's not necessarily the case. It's more of, we have lots of sticks and we have lots of rubber bands. And the sticks are the bone, the rubber bands the muscle. And because we have constant tension, that's what gives our body structural integrity, hence the name tensegrity. Tension is what gives our body structural integrity. Now, this can miscalculate because things can stay overly engaged, or we can have bad patterns, right? Because another line is Um, the number one predictor of injury is previous injury, but the number two predictor of injury is muscle imbalance. Now, we already have natural asymmetries in the body because the body needed room for the heart. So we have three lobes of our lung on the right side, two lobes on the left side. Our diaphragm is larger on our right side than it is the left side. Statistically speaking, you can see a larger population being right side dominant than left side dominant, and this is part of the reasoning because of that. So when someone is really good at their right side engagement, well, that's going to create an imbalance, and usually their right trap is engaged, their shoulder might be retracted back, but we'll get to that later, and they're stuck. They're stuck in this right side. And now a classic line is there's no such thing as a bad movement, just one you can't get out of, right? So if I'm trying to engage my left side and I'm stuck in this right side, that's going to be a problem to that tensigriddy structure, because when I try to go left, this tugs down too hard on my right side and I'm not able to properly get that full range of motion. I'm chock full of quotes because I think it's so much easier to understand things with simple quotes. This is from Gray Cook, who wrote a book on movement and really defined the way that trainers assess individuals' movement patterns, called the functional movement screen. And the line is, um, movement is the basis for all exercise. When movement quality is poor, then we add fitness on top of dysfunction. And it's so true. So you really got to address these things. And again, the reason we're starting with the neck is because it's part of the command center. So when we can adjust where the command center sits, usually the rest adjusts as well, shoulders and hips, referencing those points. Now, another thing here is joint by joint theory. So, and pendulum theory. I'll talk about both of those here. We have stable joints and mobile joints, and they stack on top of each other. So where there's a stable joint, above and below it is a mobile joint, and that's how our body works to keep its structural integrity as well. Now, with pendulum theory, if I have my center point, if you can think of a person standing up, their center of mass, if I have my hips going out back further than they should, then my head and shoulders are going to stick farther this way, because that's balancing the pendulum. So what usually happens is the head protrudes forward. You see a lot of people with that kyphotic or that upper neck roundness, that forward head posture, usually because they're at a computer all day, or that's just how we walk, right? I mean, walking is controlled falling. So if I'm sticking my head forward and I pick my leg up, where's that gravity going to drive me? It's going to drive me forward. So it starts with the head being out of position, and then everything else will be out of position. That's the pendulum theory and joint by joint theory. And then back to mobile stable. So if we're working top down, I want my neck to be mobile. I want my scapula to be stable. I want my shoulders to be mobile. I want my thoracic spine to be stable or mobile, excuse me. And then I want my lumbar to be stable. I want my hips to be mobile. I want my knees to be stable. And I want my ankles to be mobile. So coming back to these movement patterns of the neck here, you can really just do a self-assessment. Can you tuck your chin to your chest without pain? Or do you feel tightness on that right side or left side? Odds are if you feel tightness or restriction, it's usually due to a trapezius muscle right back here below the neck, behind the collar there. The next one is extension. Can you bring your head back as far as it can without feeling a restriction? Can you rotate your chin over your shoulder on the left side without restriction? Can you rotate your chin on your right side without restriction? There's a lot of muscles involved. You have intercostals, your levator scapula plays a huge role. So there's so many different muscles that can stay engaged and restrict us in these movement patterns. That's why it's so important to prioritize movement quality before exercise. But then what usually happens is, because something is so tight, It's because it's weak. So that's where strength training comes in. So again, we want to improve good movement, but then we need to strength train to create better instincts so that in the future we fix the problem. If you're constantly addressing the same problem over and over and over again, that's when it's time to check in with a professional, get some assistance. A lot of times we can't read the label when we're in the jar, and we can't always get the best perspective finding out what's the restrictive part. When we have fascia that wraps around our muscle. It's like this thick collagen webbing material. And usually what happens is if I take a piece of gum and I squeeze it tight here and I pull it, it's going to thin out in the middle here. And that's where I'm going to experience pain. But the problem isn't that area. The problem is where it's being held, because that fascia can get stuck to the muscle and not allow for good gliding of the muscle so that we can get the proper movement we need. So that's where you have to find those sticking points. And with fascia work, it is no pain, no gain. You are absolutely going to find a trigger point or a painful spot, and you're trying to break that tissue up. Scraping, you can go to a rolfer, they'll scrape your fascia. And then, on the flip side, you can also just find the contralateral muscle associated and strengthen that. So if like my right trap is constantly tight all the time, maybe I need to strengthen my left trapezius, and that might help rebalance my head so I'm not having that right side staying tight all the time because it's pulling and my left side's weak. So that pretty much covers the neck. Again, just recapping: flexion, extension, lateral rotation or lateral flexion, and then rotation. Being able to perform those movements evenly to an even degree on both sides of the laterals and the rotation is going to be huge to how the rest of your body responds. Now, let's see. Just seeing. All right, cool. We're doing great on time. So the next one we're going to talk about is shoulders. This is usually kind of goes hand in hand with neck, because usually, again, we have that forward head position, and then our shoulder can't properly articulate, and then we feel more restriction. Now, another thing with our shoulders, we probably won't have time for hips today, but the thing with shoulders is my scapula, so my shoulder blade, you want that to really sit on your rib cage. That's the platform for the upper body. So if my shoulders are near my ears, my scapula isn't properly engaged to stabilize so that then I can get the right range of motion with my shoulder girdle. So usually what we try to cue is shoulder blades slid into your back pockets, and you're squeezing your armpits so you can feel your lats working as well. So when we can, again, back to proper alignment, proper posture, when we can ensure that someone's scapula can sit on their rib cage, that's going to be the platform for them to get the shoulder mobility they need for pressing overhead, for circumduction, for medial rotation, for internal rotation, external rotation, flexion, extension without pain. Now, the problem with the shoulder is it's probably the most awkwardly made joint, because it's three bones coming together and a bunch of muscle wrapped around, and that's your rotator cuff. And it's really easy to get an impingement on that rotator cuff and feel a lot of tight pain here. One of the first places to address is usually that bicep tendon, because that's where it also connects into that same insertion point where the rotator cuff is. So usually when people have tightness or impingement and we can get them to be back here, because some people actually are stuck in this kyphotic position, right? They're stuck here. They can't even move back there. They have to break up their pec minor, work on their breaking up their lats and just getting to that proper position. But then the next thing I would address is that bicep tendon. Um, that can usually relieve a lot of pain and tension at that insertion point. And then, like I said before, that pec minor. So the pec minor is more associated with kind of the top of the chest. It's actually underneath the musculature of the main chest of the pectoral major, and it wraps around that insertion point again. So usually those two areas, bicep, pec minor, those tend to be really tight. They tend to be really weak, and that's what causes them to be stuck in this position, because again, there's no bad posture, just the one we can't get out of. And again, this is usually just from typing all day or carrying things all day, or just the fact that we move forward all the time and we're not ever retracted back and looking at how our posture is. Let me bring back this diagram here. So let's go with abduction, just bringing the arm away from the shoulder. That's the first thing you want to start with, and you want to be able to slide that shoulder blade into your back pocket, and you should be able to hold that position pretty easily. Again, because you have that platform of your rib cage. Then you should be able to go flexion, lift your arm up overhead. Can you even let it drift behind you, like hyper flexion essentially, or hyper extension at that point? And then extension, bringing the arm behind you. Another little quick assessment. All right, let me finish the movement first, and I'll tell you the assessment. But another movement is, let's see what it's called, medial rotation. So when you keep your elbow bent and you're opening up and closing. The best exercises that I love for the shoulder are YTWs. So you can get on a bench, have your chest supported by the bench, you're facing down on the ground, and put the bench at an incline. And what you want to do is work on Ys first, which is just bringing your arms up to a Y. Then you can work on Ts, which is just bringing your arms behind you, squeezing your shoulder blades together, puffing your chest out, having your elbows in line with your shoulders, and coming for Ws. And usually those three movements can be a great way to warm up the subscap and the rear delts and other smaller muscles that are associated with stabilizing that scapula, with stabilizing that position, so that the larger muscles can do the work of whatever exercise you're trying to perform. And usually shoulders are going to be a problem when you try to press overhead. Sometimes when you're trying to do a pulling exercise, sometimes people, when they deadlift, they'll feel shoulder impingement, because that's how bad their arms are being pulled forward. So they go to pick up a weight and the bar's pulling them more into that impingement and that causing that pain. But a quick little assessment you can do, and this is right out of the functional movement screen, is sticking your arms out at your sides, wrapping your fingers around your thumbs, and without moving your head, you're going to rotate one fist behind your, underneath and behind your back, and one over top, and you're going to try to bring them together. And now have a friend or a family member kind of maybe take a picture of both sides, because what you're looking for is this distance the same as this distance? Because that's a good sign. You want them to be about 1 hand length apart, 1.5 hand lengths apart. But the biggest thing that we usually see is that they can get really close on one side, but not the other. And again, we talked about injuries, which are going to set us back in the gym anyway, or in anything in life. And the number one predictor of injury is previous injury. Number two is imbalance. So that's something that we're really going to want to address if we have that shoulder problem. If one gets really close and the other side can't get close at all. Let's talk about let's see, we have 10 more minutes. I think it's great that we're talking about movement. I do also want to explain a few exercises to do. It's a little bit hard to demonstrate here in this setting. I'll have to probably fix that another time. so that I can actually show you different exercises. But if you come into a forward plank position, you can usually tell if your chest is caved in. And what you're looking to do is create that thoracic expansion. Because usually this cavity, this is a chest cavity, is collapsed. And that's where our head doesn't have a platform to sit on, and our shoulders are in a bad position to have that impingement. So if you go into a plank position, think about having a straight line or a dowel. You can take like a broomstick and it should be able to touch the back of your head, the middle of your back, and in between your shoulder blades and your tailbone. If it can do that, the next thing you want to do is try to puff your chest towards the top of your head. And that's going to help you feel what that position is like when you have that expansion in your chest cavity there. The next piece is breathing, being able to breathe in that position so that your body gets comfortable holding that position. You want your body to be able to click save on these positions so that, again, you're creating better instincts and not having to do the same thing every single time you're in the gym, and having the same reoccurring issues. There's a fine line between having a 4 to 8 week progression and trying to get your body to improve something, and then doing the same thing every single day, expecting different results and kind of beating a dead horse. So when you can get to that proper thoracic expansion, the next thing is to strengthen that position. So I love a single arm overhead press. Since we won't have time today to talk about the rest of the body, you'll start in a half kneeling position, because that will stabilize your trunk. That will stabilize everything from your hips down, and we'll worry about that another day. And then you worry just about that expansion. You worry about your core staying engaged, and you're doing a single arm overhead press, keeping that elbow tight to your rib cage, locking out overhead. Because what that is doing is strengthening the way that shoulder blade sits on that rib cage. I even see a lot of people doing lat pull downs with the cable, and their arms will come up to their ears. And again, they're not in a good position. They'll start to kind of round at the very bottom, and they're just adding to bad movement patterns. Remember, if movement patterns are poor, we add fitness on top of dysfunction. So if you think about a pull-up or a lat pull-down, you want to be able to be here. You want to be able to keep those shoulder blades back the whole time. And now you're going to work the bigger muscles, because the smaller muscles are holding everything in proper position. So half kneeling, single arm overhead press, half kneeling, single arm like cable row, because since you're going to be vertical. Another great exercise. Serratus' power, absolutely. So that's a big thing too. When you are, and that's Eric. That's our resident fitness professional. He has his master's in strength conditioning, and I couldn't figure out how to bring him online. I see that there are some viewers here, but I don't know how to add anyone on. Let me see for a second here. But yeah, so your serratus, this small little muscle here, almost like your shark fins here, that's going to help keep your shoulder blade from being out of position, collapsing forward, and not being engaged. So when you can be here, you can feel this muscle engaged. You can feel your subscap, your scap attached to your rib cage. Now you can press freely and have that shoulder girdle rotate properly without any impingement. And again, you're strengthening this position so that you don't have this reoccurring issue. As I said, half kneeling single arm row, half kneeling cable row. A standing overhead press is a great exercise. Lat pull downs are great. Pull-ups are great. Even something as simple as a breathing exercise can help improve your positioning. So, I love this line. It's from, I think, Dr. Norman Doidge in The Brain That Changes Itself, where attention goes, firing flows, and connections grow. So when you are, a lot of times we think we can be the strong lifter and we can just go in there and bust it out and grip it and rip it. but it's going to pay to be the smarter lifter. That's what the idea of Think Fitness Life. Think first, exercise, then go live your best life. So, the more that you can visualize your proper positioning, the more that you can feel your shoulder blades sitting on your rib cage, and the more you can be in that position when you add resistance, even if you're just using a band, because the band is going to provide for progressive tension. You're going to have like no tension on the band from this position. You're going to feel the band in this position, and that's going to help activate those muscles. It's going to help overload that muscle. It's going to help create that adaptation that you're looking for so you can strengthen your body in a proper position and maintain that position and create better instincts for yourself. Those are probably my 2 or my 3 kind of go-to exercises for strengthening this thoracic expansion. But again, breathing is going to be huge. You want to be able to keep that core engaged. You want to be able to expand that chest cavity. And that kind of about wraps it up for the shoulder. But let's see. Yeah, I think we'll just cover, because I don't want to get into something I won't be able to cover too much longer here. So we'll stick with head, neck, and shoulders today. Thank you for those who attended. The more people that show up to these, the better this is going to be, because we're going to be able to help each individual based upon their different issues. We've seen people who have extreme kyphosis. I've seen people with lordosis who are really back here. I've seen people who have had shoulder surgeries. Seen people who had bicep tendons torn. So there's a lot of different ways that these problems can come about. And there's also multiple solutions. There's multiple ways to skin a cat, so to speak. And it's really hard as a trainer to just speak so generally and hope that it's going to be the most applicable information for each individual. So that's why we're going to really try to encourage people to ask questions, come to these live trainings, and get free support from us. We've been in the gym. Eric and I have been in the gym. I've been in for 9 years. Eric's been for 12 years, 13, 14, I think. And the best thing we can do is implementation, understanding progression, regressions, and how the basic structure of something in theory plays out into practical application for that individual based upon their circumstances, their movement patterns, their exercise history, and their access to equipment. So, I think we're going to just wrap it up. Unless anyone has any questions, I'll leave about another minute here in case anyone wants to throw out any questions. All right, well, I think that wraps it up for today. Movement quality with neck and shoulders. Next week, we'll get into hips and ankles. We've launched our next contest. We're giving away a Peloton bike this time. There's lots of ways to earn entries. There's a survey. You can ask a question in our Facebook group. You can watch our free training videos on YouTube. We have blogs. We have podcasts to help anyone who's really just looking out for more information so that they can live their best life, achieve their fitness goals, and live their best life. Already said it. So, without further ado, hope everyone enjoys the rest of their weekend, and we'll catch you next time.